Welcome to the Global Citizen Life podcast. Today on the show, we have Nick. Thank you, Nick, for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Sally.
So, tell our listeners a little bit about where you're at. So, why you chose the country you chose. And then within that, out of all the potential places you could have lived, why did you choose the city that you were in?
hmm So I'm in a country called Latvia. Not many people may know about it, but bonus points if you do. It's a small Eastern European country, and one of the reasons I chose it is because my family is originally from here. My parents grew up in the Soviet Union and then moved to the U.S. So I kind of came back to the homeland, as you could say. But I also have family here, and I guess growing up, I've always felt closer to Latvian slash Russian roots and heritage. I don't know if you guys know the history, but Latvia was part of the Soviet Union. There's a big Russian population here. Many people still speak Russian, so I've always felt closer to that. So I decided to make the move a few months ago back here. Also, having Latvian citizenship helped a lot. And as far as where I'm in Latvia. I chose Riga, the capital city, for obvious reasons. It's the most amount of people here, the most going on, and the most interesting city here.
Excellent. It's actually interesting. I read an article just within the last few days that I didn't read the whole thing. I just kind of skimmed through it, but a lot of it was based something titled along the lines of how first generation Americans are moving back to their, I'll call it their homeland. I mean, even though they were born in
Mhm.
the US, but how their parents have come from various countries around the world, have come to North America and, lived there, had kids, raised families. And now those kids are, with some of them in their 20s, 30s, are now looking to, and a number of them are moving back to kind of the home country of the parents. And I just thought it was quite interesting. It's something I want to do a little bit of more research to see what those numbers are.
Yeah, I feel like there is a big push in the U.S. to kind of move abroad and maybe explore a little bit outside of your bubble in the U.S. and see other countries and other cultures. But I guess for me, everybody thinks I'm psycho for wanting to leave the U.S. and move to these European countries. But it's good to know I'm not alone.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my father was born in the Netherlands, and so I've lived in a number of countries, and I'm in Europe, and I generally feel very European. I remember when I was a kid, I was outside of the school. It was probably winter because I hate winter and I hate being cold. And I remember saying to my friends, I think I've been switched at birth. And they were like, "What? Your parents aren't your parents?" And then I kind of laughed. I'm like, "No, like they are. I look like them. My parents are definitely my parents." So, but there's something in me that just says I am not supposed to live in Canada my entire life. And it was just this weird, like gut instinct, natural thing. And I forgot about it. And then decades later, I have now lived in 5 countries now. And so I think there's a number of us that, there's just that feeling we're meant to move around, to explore. And also I think there's different types of opportunities in different countries. And when we're born in a country, whether it's Canada, the United States, the UK, I mean, and those are great countries to be born in. And there's definitely a lot of opportunity having those passports and living there. But at the same time, once you have all of those things, sometimes we just want something that's different.
Hmm.
And I understand how people from other countries want to move to
Yeah.
North America and the UK, and they think of jobs and pay and things like that. But I also like to mention to people too that sometimes when they're looking and they say, "Oh, well, I make X amount in the country that I'm in. So if I move to Germany, the UK, Canada, the United States, I can make 3 times as much." And I say, "Yes, that's possible, but is housing 3 times as much? Is food 3 times as much? Is everything else?" Because it's not always just, "I'm gonna make more, but my cost of living is gonna stay the same."
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think I saw this Instagram reel once of this Russian guy who moved to the U.S. and you're saying like, oh, working at a gas station, you could make $20 an hour, which back in Russia, that's like like astonishing amount of money. But like in the
Mm.
U.S., you can't live off that. Sure, it sounds good. It sounds good, compared to Russian salaries, but the cost of living, you got to pay for all these other extra expenses. So I think that's something people, yeah, need to factor in. I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day in the US, you still do make more money, like even after all the expenses. I'm not arguing that, but just you got to also factor in the other factors that go into it.
Absolutely. And it isn't, it's lifestyle and things and what we want. So it isn't just that price dollar tag. Like I help people move abroad and reduce taxes and things like that. And I was just reading an article the other day. I'm a part of a newsletter, and the guy said, moving for taxes, I think it was titled Moving for Taxes is a Prison Sentence. And I was like,
Mm,
what? And he ended up moving to Cyprus. Now, obviously, when I help people, I want to make sure that they're moving to somewhere for the right reason and having things set up for the right reasons. But you still have to enjoy life. You still have to be happy, and you still have to know that there's challenges and benefits no matter where we live and what we do. And so when we move somewhere, it's not just about how much money we're getting get paid doing our job, the
hmm
cost of living, it's lifestyle, safety, security, doing the things we want, the weather we want. And part of me for leaving Canada, part was the weather. Like, I hate winter. Minus 20,
hmm
30, 40 degrees Celsius is ridiculous. Like, I don't ever want to be in that. So, it was one of the big factors. And whenever I move, when I'm looking at countries, I will not consider living full time in a country that gets below, well, I don't even like below 10 degrees Celsius anymore, which is when I talk to my friends, they think I'm crazy because they're like, "You're from Canada," but I don't like that weather. I don't want to be there. And so knowing that and knowing myself that there's still so many countries and places to live in that I don't have to have that weather. Even in Spain, living there, like there's parts of Spain that gets cold. There's parts of Spain that gets a lot of snow. So even when I'm in Spain, I mean, I'm not in those regions, but there's the Pyrenees Mountains, so there's still skiing, there's still snow, there's stuff for people who like those types of things, right? So you could still be in one country but have different types of weather and and just different energy and vibes in different cities.
Yeah, I think Latvia might not be the place for you then.
Well, yeah, I would like to visit and see during summertime. Um, but to live, it would not be on a place for me to live there. And that's okay, right? That
Yeah.
like there isn't one place that makes everybody happy, and it's for us to look at what we want, the lifestyle we want, the weather we like, the conveniences we like, and then finding that place that fits as best for what we want, because there is no perfect place in the world. I wish I could take the bits from all these different
hmm
countries and put them together into one, and then it would be perfect. But that's just not reality.
Yeah, no, 100%. And going back to the opportunities that you mentioned, I think we're living in such a unique time where, 20 years ago, you had to be in New York City if you wanted to earn so much money. Like you couldn't leave the country and go to, for example, Serbia and get all these opportunities and earn the same amount of money that you can online right now. And even seeing that within countries. Like Dallas 20 years ago, Dallas, Texas, that's where I was living when I was last in the US. It didn't have all these companies and jobs and opportunities like it did 20 years ago. But now there's a huge boom, and I think we're seeing, uh, opportunities being spread out more evenly across the world, where you could be living anywhere and still be making good money from the internet and your laptop.
Absolutely. It really has changed. And I think another thing that changed a lot with that was the pandemic.
hmm
That was a huge kind of tipping point where people realized many things, but one was, do I even like my job? Do I want to do my job? Do I have to be in the office? Or can I do something remote? I'm a huge fan of co-working spaces. Like I
hmm
love to work from home, but I'm also a very much extroverted. So I love to go to co-working spaces and be around people and be there 2, 3 days a week, depending on the week. Again, depending upon the weather. If it's raining and windy outside, it's nice to be, I'm just going to stay home and work. And to have that, and you're right, and we're seeing a lot of changes of what can be done and what cities and countries around the world are shifting and becoming big as startups or digital nomad visas that are allowing people to move, and just a lot more flexibility and offers for residency permits, and for those like yourself to have citizenship and getting that dual citizenship to again give more opportunity to live if you choose to full-time, part-time, just stay, whatever it may be. And I think that's the big thing now too is everything's not black and white. And it's not like
Mhm.
extreme, like, oh, you move for your job, you stay there, you live there for years, and then maybe your job transfers you again. It's where do I want to go? What do I like? And where do I want to go try?
Yeah, and it kind of makes me a bit scared for, I guess, skilled workers in the US and some of these Western countries, because a lot of work is shifting remote, and why hire somebody in the US where you need to pay benefits and a much higher salary when you could hire somebody in some of these other countries that speak English perfectly, and it's a lot cheaper. Like, for example, I was working in Cyprus at a corporate job, and everybody's English was, I thought they were native speakers. I thought they grew up in the UK. I thought they grew up in some of these English-speaking countries, but no, they were born, raised in Cyprus, and just learned English that way. So that's something, opportunities are shifting around the world. And for my agency, I have a digital content agency. We're definitely not only looking, for hiring in the U.S., but now we've expanded our reach and said, okay, maybe some of these other countries have candidates that are just as qualified, have just as good English, and that can also be beneficial to us.
Definitely. It is a big change. So let's talk about lifestyle
Hmm.
in Riga in there in Latvia compared to North America. What are some of the biggest differences and maybe a few things that might have surprised you before you made the move?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, so I guess I guess it's definitely a more humble lifestyle here. There are still remnants of, the Soviet Union in terms of architecture, how the people interact, the facilities, things like that. For example, when I was living back in the US, I was living in like a super nice apartment complex, pool, game room, gym, just, super nice. And that's pretty normal for Texas. While here, obviously, I'm living in a much more humble apartment. I don't have a lot of those luxuries, but I realize that's not really what life is about. That's not really what I'm seeking. Sure, that's all nice, but what matters more to me is the people I'm surrounded with, the how I feel in the city that I'm living in. And here, I think it's a more interesting experience for me than it was back in Texas. Uh, yeah, as I mentioned, definitely a more Soviet lifestyle, but I think that might be a little bit good to experience, especially for somebody that grew up in America. I think life in America can be a little bit too comfortable at times. For example, I have a younger brother who's 11 right now. He grew up like completely in America, like doesn't even know anything about Russian culture or Latvia itself, while my brother and I, we would often come here to Latvia to spend summers, and just seeing like the difference in how we were raised, how we're growing up. We didn't have all these tablets and all these luxuries that my younger brother has. So I think it's good to experience that type of stuff coming from the West.
I think too, um, because like right now I'm in Montenegro, and
Hmm.
there was similar but different, obviously, with Latvia being part of Russia, and Montenegro was part of the former Yugoslavia.
Hmm.
And there was the breakdown of that. I think it was about 20 years ago. So there's still, with people who lived through that, there's remnants of it, and people feel it like here in Montenegro, it's not a materialistic country.
Hmm.
Of course there's people that want and it's, they want nice things. Everybody wants food, clothing, shelter, stuff like that. Um, but the overall that I find isn't, you know, buy this big screen TV or buy this new car and you'll be the envy of the neighborhood. And don't worry, if you
Hmm.
can't afford it, Visa's got you covered. Like it just isn't like that. And I felt the same way when I first left Canada when I was living in Costa Rica. Very different. Um, and there's very wealthy people in every country, and there's a lot
Hmm.
of people who don't have a lot in every country. But it's just that feeling and energy. And I find that the countries who have recently, and by recently I even mean like the last 30 years, if the country has gone through wars or been
Hmm.
even close to part of it, really what's important shifts. It's not about work 18 hours a day and do better than everybody else to make more money, to buy more stuff. Those just really aren't priorities. And I think that's why for a lot of us, we get the difference of when we've lived in that and we realize like it's not really that much of a priority. We want a different lifestyle. We want more laid back, more relaxed, more enjoyable, more people, more experiences, not stuff. But people who haven't lived with much stuff, some do dream of going to America, and that's the dream to have the great job and to have the big house and to have the nice car and to have
Hmm.
those things. So our perspective is different because it depends on how we grew up and what we came from.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to what we talked earlier. People want just something different. If you grew up in same town, same city your whole life, you'd probably want to go and explore something different. Same with people in Europe. They see all these movies of America, Hollywood, and I
Mm,
think oftentimes they have a false perception of what America really is. I know I've had some conversations where people are like, "Oh, like everybody's super rich, your college education, you guys learn something crazy that we don't learn in our countries." I'm like, no, like it's the same problems. We have poor people, we have bad teachers in universities, so it's the same problems everywhere. But I can understand that people want something different and new.
That it reminds me too of the perspective of Dubai. I was in Dubai last year, and we see the advertising of, it's like all the millionaires, the billionaires, the everything, and you have to be a multimillionaire to live there. And a friend of mine moved there, and she's not a multimillionaire. And I went to visit, and I enjoyed my time there. It was nice. It was clean. It was January of last year, so the weather was great. It wasn't super hot or anything like that. But when I looked, I was kind of thinking, it's not. I didn't walk around thinking, "Oh my gosh, everybody here is a millionaire and you have to be a millionaire to live here." And
Hmm.
and I think that's a little bit of a problem with media, with a lot of advertising, promoting, and everything is made to look like it's extravagant and perfect and wonderful. And I think and that's not even just Dubai, it's every country. And we see YouTubers and we see these videos of people on vacation and traveling around, and it's only just showing kind of the good stuff, the nice stuff, the making it great, not showing the problems, the inconveniences, the hassles, the bureaucracy, the number of things that in every country, there hasn't been one that I've been to that I think, why do they do this way? If they would just do it like they do in X country, it would be easier and better. And I've said that in Canada, I'm like, why do they do it like this? Why don't they do it somewhere
Hmm.
else? So every country I find has things that they do better or worse than others, but everything is just promoted to be rainbows and butterflies. And so I often say to people, if it's all rainbows and butterflies, where are the unicorns? Because it's not just rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, no, yeah, I've definitely noticed that, different countries, different mentalities, especially going from US corporate culture, working in a US job and then working in a Cyprus job, they definitely value, time off a lot more. And me as an American, I was like, there's a little bit too much vacation. Like there'd be like a week of no work. I'm like, I have no idea what to do with myself. I think there's pros and cons to both systems. Obviously, the U.S. is the greatest economy in the world, and there's so many companies and startups and CEOs that have come from the US, so that's unmatched. But in Europe, I think people do enjoy themselves a little bit more. And I would say for the average person, like if you're just taking the average citizen, life is more enjoyable in Europe because you have more help, I guess, from the government and more of these public services. Because I hear a lot of Americans, kind of brag about the U.S. being the number one economy, and we're so rich, we have all this, but they themselves are working a 9 to 5 that they hate. They themselves aren't, you know, making all this money. So like, what good is it if you can't benefit from it? At the end of the day, it matters how, like, what kind of life are you living?
Right. I agree. And I mean, exactly as you said, like how many people get up in the morning and they're hating their job and they're spending so many hours. And then also the level of debt. If we talk
Mm-hmm.
like just kind of that average of how many people are in so much debt. And I'm not talking reasonable debt. Like you have a mortgage
Mm-hmm.
on a property, your house is mortgaged. Okay, to me that's like normal kind of reasonable debt. But it's credit cards for buying things that well, they just don't need. And they just buy to give those little um hits of, oh, I'm excited, oh, this makes me feel good. Like, I'm sorry, Starbucks, but your coffee's not worth $6 7 or whatever it is now. I don't even know because
Mm-hmm.
it's coffee and I just don't, for me it's not worth it, but some people, they have to have their Starbucks coffee every morning, it's worth it, and I just don't see the value of it. I wouldn't spend it. And part is because I'm not a huge coffee drinker,
Mm-hmm.
but I would rather do something else with my money. And so it is that what brings us joy and happiness type thing. But there's a lot of unhappy people for a variety of reasons in every country. And that's what I like about what I do is helping people figure out, what do you want? What do you like? What don't you like? What do you definitely don't want? Because sometimes those not wantings and knowing what we don't want is as important as what we do want because it's just an elimination process. So, like
Mm-hmm.
for me with cold weather, I don't want to live anywhere with cold. So that eliminates a number of countries or cities within a country. And that's good because I can like, okay, that's an elimination. What have you found are some of the challenges for you with moving to or living in Latvia?
Mm. The challenges living here, you're saying?
Yeah.
Good question. I mean, I guess every time you move to a new place, you kind of have to restart. You need to find your coffee shop you go to. You need to find your, certain places that you go to. But also meeting new people can also be a struggle. I remember when I was, watching all this digital nomad content a few years back when I had this dream of being able to live anywhere in the world. I heard about loneliness and people talking about how hard it is to make friends. I was like, it's fine. I'll figure it out. But no, that definitely is a challenge. And every time you move, you have to reset. But I think there are also a lot of things that you can do, and there's different meetup groups, different sites that you can go to, and if you really make an effort and put yourself out there, you can overcome that.
I agree completely. And I think depending upon how you're moving makes a difference too, or kind of that what stage are you at life? Because if you're moving and you're being transferred because you have a job and then you're
Hmm.
going into a corporate place or business, you will automatically meet people because you're colleagues and coworkers. That's one of the things I do like about co-working is because I'm self-employed. I work for myself. My staff is kind of the people who I work with and collaborate with are all over. I like that co-working because then I do meet people and get to know people. And it takes a bit of time though to kind of get to know people. If you have kids, you'll automatically, if they're in school, will meet other parents and things like that. But I do find that, it's up to us. It's
Hmm.
not like when we were kids when we went to school and then we became friends with everybody else in our class because we're the same age. We're having, every year everybody's having a birthday. We're kind of at the same stages all the way through life. So it's very easy and convenient to have friends until we finish school. Because
Hmm.
then once we're done school, even like college, university, from there, then people are moving for jobs, people are relocating, eventually getting married. And then even there. So when people say to me sometimes too about loneliness, I say, yes, sometimes I get lonely,
Hmm.
but I've also been lonely in my home country.
Exactly.
So that shouldn't be, if that's a concern, that shouldn't be something that stops us, especially if you're already kind of feeling that way at home. But then it is, what do you like to do? What hobbies, activities, those types of things, because then that's what you want to look at. If you love hiking and being in the mountains, then you want to be looking at a city or a town near the mountains or in the mountains because you like to go hiking. Or if you like surfing, you want to be at a place then that you can go surfing most of the year or year round. And it's finding those places that have the things that we like to do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Finding a country that fits you, both your morals, your, desires for weather, your culturally, the people that you want to surround yourself with. And it takes trial and error too. Sometimes you go to a country and it's not what you expected it to be, so
Mm.
that's totally fine, and you could find somewhere else.
That's where I find it's really important to do scouting trips. Now, it's
Hmm.
it's one thing I didn't really do them, but for me, as I've moved every time, because it's just me. And so it's
Hmm.
easy for me to go to a place and be like, yeah, maybe I'm going to move here. And I go and 6 months, 8 months later, if it's something, and it hasn't actually been that way, but if it was something that didn't work or I didn't like, I could just easily move because it is just me, just one person. Obviously, if somebody's got spouse, partner,
Hmm.
kids, then it is more important to do research because I've seen it happen and I feel so bad that people they sell all their stuff in their home country, they move to X country and they, they're there 6 months a year. They bought a whole bunch of stuff again because that's what we do. And they decide, yeah, this isn't right for me. I'm going back to my home country. And then so they're selling all their stuff again
Hmm.
and starting all over. And so I tell people sometimes to just wait or to travel as much as they can. And when you're in a place, the first few times it's a bit hard, but you have to try to look at it not as you're on vacation because you
Hmm.
know what? It's great. You can be in any country and wow, the monuments, the streets, the everything, it's so wonderful and it's so great because it's new. And after about 6 to 9 months is where I find that that newness has now worn off. Now you're getting into that routine and hopefully you do have already that coffee shop that you like to go to where you chat a little bit to the person who works there. You may or may not become friends, but it's just like, oh hey, how are you? Yep, I'm gonna have this. And you have that chit chat because once that newness wears off, then it's reality. You're
Yeah.
living there. You're still, most of us are working, or for those who are retired, what are you going to do with your time? Because just because you move to a new place, that's great, but you're still living. There's still day to day. There's still, you got to go to the grocery store. You got to pay bills. You got to walk or drive to whatever you want to do. How are you spending your days? Because otherwise, every place gets boring.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something I experienced. I guess it took a little bit less than 6 to 9 months for me. I think maybe even after 3 months, I'm like, okay, the newness is kind of worn off, and um, I see the city for how it really is. When I came to Latvia in the summer, I came to visit my family, and I was like, wow, like that's it. I'm moving here. Everything is so beautiful. I'm just dropping all my things and moving here. And now that newness has kind of worn off, not saying I don't like it here or it's bad, but it's definitely different like seeing a place for the first time or for, a few
Mhm.
days versus seeing it for a month, 3 months, 6 months. So definitely keep that in mind. But you also mentioned, packing up all your things and moving. I think if you're young and you don't have a family or anything holding you down, like that is the perfect time. That's exactly why I decided to make the jump. It'd be a lot more selfish if I had a kid, to take to school and I'm like, okay, that's it. We're packing up and moving to Cyprus or to Latvia. So if you're young, it's a golden opportunity.
Absolutely. And just with that newness, what I like to compare it to when I talk to people is if you've ever bought a new car, it doesn't have to be brand new, but new for
Hmm.
you. And you get it and it's all nice and clean. And at first we say, I'm never going to eat in the car. I'm
Hmm.
never, I'm not going to let my friends smoke in the car if you have friends that smoke. And I'm going to make sure like it's always clean, like all of those things because we're so excited. And we do that for the first couple of months. And then we're so hungry. It's okay. Just this one time I'll have something. And
Yeah.
then just this one time. And then eventually it's like, yeah, it's my car. I've had it for 6 months. I've had it for a year. It's very similar. That kind of newness of it wears off. And so we have to look at it from a different perspective. And I always recommend for people when they're gonna do a scouting trip and they're gonna go look, they've already narrowed it down to one country, to visit a few cities because the energy or vibe of each city is gonna be different. And I say city, but that could be if you prefer a town or a village or whatever size population a person prefers, to check out a few different places because that energy will be different. And to also go when you consider the weather is the worst. So for
Mm.
me, weather would be the worst during a winter, what would be considered winter in that country or city. For some people who hate the heat, prime summertime is the best time to go because then you think about if this is the worst weather for me, how do I feel about living here or being here? Or is this the time that I'm going to spend these month, 2, 3 months traveling, going back to my home country, visiting family, friends, or whatever it may be? But how do I feel being here in what is the worst weather for me?
Hmm. And I think the good thing about Europe is, I was when I was living in Cyprus and I was looking at some countries in Asia as well, is that if you don't like a country, it's very easy to move. You could take a train, take a bus, hop around from country to country. So that gives you a lot more options than, for example, if you were need to fly, halfway across the world or take an 8-hour flight just to move to the next country.
It's funny because I say that to people because, so we don't realize how big some countries are.
Hmm.
And I say to people here in Europe, if I wanted to, I'm in Spain. It's a few hours. When there were direct flights from Montenegro to Barcelona, I think it was about 2.5 hours. So it's easy, and you could just pick up an Airbnb and be gone for a month if the weather wasn't great, or to travel around to a number of different countries. But coming from Canada, I would say to people, if I was on the West Coast, which I'm pretty close, but not exactly Vancouver West Coast. But if I were to fly from West Coast to East Coast, probably not including the islands, 7 hours. I think you could probably fly in Canada for 7 hours and still be in Canada.
Yeah, that definitely Europe is very convenient in that sense. I don't know if you have citizenship or passport, but definitely opens up a lot in terms of options.
It really does, and I always recommend to people, if you have parents or in some cases grandparents who have lived in Europe, and especially for a lot of people in North America, thousands and thousands, millions came over to North America during various times in previous years of wars and famine and things like that. That if you can get that second passport, definitely do it. It doesn't mean you have to live in that specific country. Like I have a friend
Hmm.
of mine who was born in Poland and then moved to Canada when she was a young child. I'm like, get that Polish passport. And she said, I don't want to live in Poland. And I said, but you don't have to. You're a Polish citizen. You can have your Polish passport. And because it's part of the European Union, you could live in any EU city and country. You fill out a few pieces of paper just to register this is where I'm now living. It's like it can't get much simpler. And it just opens the door to a lot of option. And then once she has it, then her son can get it as well. So then he would have Canadian, Polish, passport, and it just opens the door for so much more opportunity for her son that if he wants to move to Europe ever, or even just travel and wants to be somewhere for 6 months in the EU and in the Schengen area, that he can be, and it's not limited to those 90 out of every 180 days. And then with different countries too, it gives easier option to open up bank accounts, to have different investments, to potentially get loans to buy property. It's a ticket of opportunity.
Yeah, and especially with, so, all these global conflicts, in 2020 we had the pandemic, and with all this craziness happening in the world, you want to give yourself the most amount of options possible. So if something happens in your home country, you're like, okay, I can go to this country and be safe here. So I think it definitely doesn't hurt to have as many options as possible.
Yeah, I agree. And so is Latvia kind of it for you? Is that going to be home for a very long time? Or are you kind of thinking it's great, love it right now, but keeping options open?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I would say for now, for sure. I'm only 23, so I'm still kind of exploring where I want to be long term. Definitely want to, keep myself in, I guess, a more predominantly Russian culture, Russian
Mhm.
speaking circle. There are a few options in Europe for that I can position myself in. But I'm here for now. Definitely want to explore some other countries before making a final decision. But I think Europe, somewhere in Europe, is where I will be long term.
And it doesn't have to be a final decision. You
Yeah,
might think it's final, but is it? I just find that some of us who do like to, especially starting at a younger age, are more likely to live in more destinations.
hmm.
Right? Because it depends on chapters, right? So when we don't have kids and we're young, we can do all kinds of stuff and move around a lot. And then maybe we settle down for a while. And, the person could stay, of course. And you have kids and you stay there because that chapter, that stability of where it is. But then once they move out of the house and there's all that freedom again, we just never know.
Yeah, I think my motivation, I have my own agency, as I mentioned, and my motivation is, or, why I'm working so hard is to not have to go back to the US and go back and have to get a 9 to 5 that I hate, and have all these responsibilities, I guess. Uh, Obviously I'm working hard, I'm running my own business, but for some reason I still feel like I'm a bit of like on a vacation when I'm living here in Europe. Maybe that's just a mental thing.
That's interesting. Because you were in Cyprus beforehand and now, so how long have you been in Latvia now?
I moved here end of November, so like 2 months, 2.5 months.
Okay. Okay. So I can see how right now still feels a little bit vacation because the other times that you have been there have been vacation
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
past. And so maybe that's why it's still that kind of feeling of vacation because you were there. But over time, give it a few more months and it'll settle more into home.
Yeah. But also, I just think, you know, I recently graduated college, and all of my friends went to go to all these different US cities like New York or DC or Texas to, work and get and settle down and get their corporate jobs. And I'm sure they love that. Maybe they all love it, and I'm happy for them. But when I look at that, I just would not want that, which is why I feel like moving to Europe, I feel a bit guilty that I'm not in some corporate office, which what I should be doing back in the U.S.
Ah,
What
that
everybody else is
word.
down yeah.
That
Europe.
should word is a word that I'm trying to remove from my vocabulary
Mhm.
because yeah, I get it's the pressures from society of what we should be doing. But if we think about it, all the people that have done great, amazing things didn't do what they should be
Mhm.
doing, right? Like how many people who have done well from themselves and stuff, dropped out of college or university and went on to develop and design things or just lived a very on non-ordinary life. Because the flip side of that is how many people are doing everything. Like I've talked to people, they're like, I've done everything I should have. I went to did this, I went to college, I had kids, I had like the
Hmm.
every step, and they're miserable, or they're in a lot of debt because they are doing stuff because they think they should to be keeping up with the Joneses, all of those types of things. And I don't think anybody should do anything that to a certain point that doesn't agree with
Hmm.
their heart and soul. Like, obviously,
Hmm.
we need to be making money, and sometimes we have to take jobs or things that we don't like to do to get us
Hmm.
on track. But as long as we're still working towards whatever that kind of dream goal, job, lifestyle is, there's certain things that we need to do that we may not enjoy doing or like to do. But I say to people all the time, with your career and where you're at, like you should be loving at least 80% of your
Hmm.
job and where you live. And if not, then, maybe you have to do it for a bit longer, but then you need to start working on what you are going to love and what you want to do or where you want to live, even though you might not be able to do that in the next year. You could be working on doing whatever it takes to get towards there. So, for example, moving abroad, I wouldn't just say, that's it. Tomorrow, if you're thinking about it, pack up all your stuff, sell it, and move. I mean, you've got to think about where you're going, the visa residency process, how it's done. You can start taking those steps knowing, okay, I'm doing this job that I don't really like very much. I'm in this city, and it doesn't even have to be even moving abroad, maybe just a different city of just like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I want to move here. What are the steps that I need to do? I'm going to put in this not great time, but there's a means to an end for that to make the money, to get the experience, to do whatever I need to. So then I can change careers, change jobs, change companies, move to a different city, move abroad, start my company. I'm putting in 3 to 5 years here to learn as I'm starting my side stuff, working on that, but being able to pay my bills. I mean, there's so many ways to do it, but I just I often say to people, if you live till you're 100, which is getting to be quite possible because more and more people
Hmm.
are, if you are doing, you're loving 80% of your life, because we all have hassles and problems and things that we go through. But that 100 years goes by fast. But if
Hmm.
you're only happy 30% of the time, that 100 years is long and painful. Which would you prefer?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as long as there's an end in sight and you have a goal that you're working towards, that's very important. For example, when I was living in Dallas and working, a job that I did not like and just wasn't in the right environment, I didn't really see like what's the point of all this? Sure, I'm making more money, or I guess on paper, is before expenses than I was in Cyprus or I am now in Latvia. But like, what's the point if I'm not happy where I'm living. The people, the culture isn't really mine. So as a result, I started working towards that. And yeah, my brother and I, we didn't pack all our stuff and move out the next day to Cyprus. It was a process of saving money, living super frugally, taking, finding a job and getting an opportunity in Cyprus. So there were steps that we took, but also I think just having that goal that you're working towards, that light at the end of the tunnel is very big. Like when my brother and I bought the tickets to Cyprus, that kind of opened up. I don't know. I feel like I was living in a cloudy environment. Like I didn't really see any hope. But then that just opened up like hope and brought light to my life. That like, okay, this is what I'm working towards. This is the goal that I need to get to.
Yeah, and it really kind of helps. Well, not even kind of. It really does help us get through those tough times
Hmm.
of, if it's the job we hate or the season or the people, the job we like, but the people that we don't like whatever it is, when we have goal in mind or results, when we have those tough days, because we all do, then it's okay. But you know what? That's okay, because we just need to remind ourselves this is the goal, and this is a bit of what I want. And for me, a little bit right now, because I'm considering
Mm-hmm.
relocating again. And the other day I was out and I was like, oh, I'm not a big shopper, but I was out and I was looking at some stuff because there's a lot of sales and things going on. And then I just thought, for one, I don't need anything. So
Mm-hmm.
why spend the money? And I think a lot of times we spend things on things we really don't need. And then the other part was, well, if I'm planning on relocating, do I want to buy more stuff that I then have to move?
Mm-hmm.
And then is this item a good item to, is it worth buying now to have for whatever amount of time to then have to, pay more, even though it was just clothing, but still that it's more luggage or I have to get rid of something or it's heavier weight. And then is that a good clothing item for where I potentially am moving to because I don't even know for sure yet. And so that there for itself also prevented me from when I thought about it, I'm like, well, it doesn't make any sense to be buying anything that I really don't need right now because I have that extra goal in mind. And so it's a way of
Mm-hmm.
additionally saving money to get to that other result that we want.
Yeah, and I think nomads, expats like us, we don't value the materialistic as much, or like that's not all that we focus on. We value more experiences, relationships, and other
Mm.
things in life. But I do think that's a very American and I'm sure Canadian thing as well, that you want to consume everything, have the nicest car, all the newest clothes, biggest house, etc. And I think we do see that in the American culture as compared to some of these countries that you and I prefer to live in.
Yeah, yeah. It's just purpose or meaning of life is just different.
Mhm.
And I mean, and those who strive to have, like to be like Elon Musk and have
Mhm.
billions, and I mean, if it's done in a good way and you're doing good things and that's your drive, we need people like that. Like
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
world needs to have people who have that drive and who want those things. And, because even if you want, like, I'm not a car person, I don't care. Bugatti, Ferrari, Tesla, like, I know that there's huge price difference between all of those things, but like cars don't matter to me. But for people who want them, that's great because they're employing people because somebody has to make them. I,
Yeah.
I think most of those like Ferraris and Bugattis and things are ridiculously overpriced, and I would never in my life buy one. But that's okay because that's just me. But there's a lot of people that are employed and who have jobs because there are people who like to have those things. So
Mhm.
everything works, and it's just at the same point for the vast majority of us, though, scientific studies have proven materialistic things don't make us happy. And so
Mhm.
we really need to come back. And I always say to people, like, what is your definition of success? Like if you've had a successful life, like you love it, you enjoy it, what is that? I mean, Mother Teresa, she had a very successful life. She loved her life with all the things that she did. And, if you look at standards, like she didn't have anything. She didn't have anything materialistic. She didn't have money. She didn't, but her giving back and taking care of things and doing things, that was success for her. And then the complete opposite when we look at the billionaires of Elon Musk, like Elon Musk's success to him is having people on Mars.
Mhm.
Great if that's, and it is of what to us on that massive scale, what is successful? What is it that you want? How do you want to live? And what can you do for work? And where in the world do you want to live for you to obtain what you feel is successful?
I agree. I could not have said it better myself.
So,
Yeah.
Nick, for you, you said you've got an agency. So, what type of agency are you working with? Because that gives some freedom, and that might help people to think about what are some things that I could do.
Yeah, so I run a digital content agency with my brother. We build personal brands for CEOs as well as celebrities and athletes. So that includes podcast management as well as content strategy and how to best position yourself online in this, world of social media and where your digital identity is becoming your real identity. Uh, so just positioning people in the best way possible and taking all of the heavy lifting off of their plate in terms of content and putting themselves out there.
Perfect. And so, if anybody's listening, they're at whatever stage they're in, thinking, I need some help with my strategy with my content, with all the things that you do, what would be the best place for them to get a hold of you if they wanted to work with you?
Yeah, they could check us out on Frayter Media. That's our site, Frayter media.com. You could see our past clients, some of the results that we've gotten them, and there's a place to book a call or just leave us a message there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure that we have the link to that in the show notes because I mean, the world is digital, and that is a huge way that people are able to move abroad, whether they're doing a full-time, part-time, side hustle, semi-retirement
Hmm.
ways. I mean, there's so many things out there and so many ways to make money online, but doing it the right way and with help is also very good as well. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time, Nick. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me on. This was a great experience, and yeah, look forward to maybe keeping in touch.
Absolutely.